Hello there, and if my screen is telling me the truth, I would appear to be live. So, hello there everybody, and welcome to UK Diesel and Electric Railway Modelling. Hopefully my audio sounds good. I'm just going to listen to myself for a second. And if my screen is... Yep, that sounds good. Okay, so, what have I got for you today? Well, I'm going to talk about two things. I'll probably ramble into a million things, but I'm going to try and keep it a little bit more narrow today, because the last video that I made, I think it turned into something like 5 hours of me just rambling away. So I apologise for that. It's sometimes, I can imagine you look at the screen and think, 5 hours, how can someone talk for 5 hours? I don't know. I think what it is, I have agoraphobia. I don't get out and meet people and talk to people very much. So sometimes I kind of just, I may not get to talk to someone for several days, a physical, actual person. I suppose me reaching out through a live camera is a way of doing that, I suppose, even if I haven't got anyone talking back. But then again, I get Asperger's, so I tend to do monologues at the best of times. I've got a couple of things I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm going to talk about Class 90's. I bought some new Class 90's recently, and I'm going to explain some of the things I'm going to do with them. I'll also talk about Class 90's in general, and then also I've got this issue of Rail magazine from 1991, and I thought I would read out a bit, because there's an interesting article about cross-country changes that were going to be happening in 1991. And I thought it was interesting for, I quite like talking about coaches. Was it 7 hours? Crikey Kelly, I can't believe it. Although, knowing me, I can. Anyway, so, but, I like to... I have an interest in coaches and coach formations and things like that, and I like to, give people information so that they can replicate this on their own layouts. This is how I'm operating mine when I actually get started, which is going to become a lot easier soon. It's already started to become easier. But anyway, so first of all, I'm going to talk about Class 90's. So I went and bought several Class 90's recently, and when I say several, I mean 7. And I already owned one from before, so I now have 4 InterCity liveried ones. In fact, I've got them all here, so I have 4 InterCity liveried ones, and I've got 4 Welfare Distribution ones. And those were £139 for the InterCity ones each, which I thought was a good deal. And I've got some RFD ones as well. There's 2 there, and another 2 here, also RFD. These ones haven't been taken out yet. So Class 90's. So Class 90's were built in 1988 to 1990. 91, sorry, because I seem to remember in this one it was brand new at the time. Trying to remember. It doesn't matter anyway, so it is written on one of these combo books, so I thought, yeah, let's have a look. I think it was 1990. 1990. 1987 to 1990. But the first one ended up, operating on the railways in 1988. So the Class 90's were originally going to be referred to as Class 87-2s, because largely they're Class 87s underneath. The bogies are the same, the motors are the same. The only real difference between them is that they are like 87-101, which had the thyristor controls, effectively it's got a computer controlled system. So instead of on an older style locomotive where you had notches, so to give you an example, electric multiple units, so you think of your 302, 304, 307s, those sorts of things, the first generation ones. The way that they effectively work is that they have, you have your power controller, and you've got 0, 1, 2, and then you've got a back one, which is like a shunting speed. So with the old-fashioned ones, so your 86s and 87s, except 87101, what you would do is you would put it in 1, and the train would accelerate. And then when you've got, your full line speed or whatever, you would whack it up to 100. But what you would do is you keep an eye on the speedo, and if the speedo, let's say you've got an 80 mile per hour zone, and pushing it all the way forward will do 110, which is what Class 90s can do, and 87s can do, and some 86s could as well. So what would happen is, as you reach the top speed, you notch it down to 1 again, and the speed will drop. Because effectively what you're doing is you're providing the power, if you imagine a bit like a controller, old-fashioned controller on a model railway, one of those old H&M kind of thing. Instead of having a variable resistor, imagine it being a notch, so it goes half speed or full speed. And so it's putting half the amount of current to the motor, and the motor will increase to maximum voltage, maximum speed based upon the voltage it's receiving. So if it's receiving 50% of the voltage, then that will be 50. That'll be half the maximum speed. If you do it to 100% of the voltage, that's the maximum speed. So all you would do is you would accelerate until it reached to the number, and then you just notch it off, and then notch it back on again. Off, 1, off, 1. And then as the speed increased, then you would go up to notch 2. And, and so you would just sort of, it's like accelerating and decelerating, there's no gradualness on it. Well, the thyristor system was effectively, how you've got a bit like one of these. This is a joystick I've got, and when you push, you can push it a little bit or push it all the way. So that's what it's a bit. That's what it's like inside the cab of a Class 90. So they were also built with TDM in mind, which is time division multiplexing. So this uses the on the end of the coaches, they've got these 3-pin plugs, and it's for the personal address system. So what they would do is they piggyback a digital signal across those lines, across those wires, through the train, and then you would have your DVT on the end. So what would happen is you have your 90 Rika Mark III coaches, the DVT, and so it would go north, and then when it got to, let's say, Manchester or Liverpool or Glasgow or something, the driver would get out, walk down the train, get in the DVT, and it would push it the opposite direction. So push-pull. They started it with DBSOs, and then continued it on through DVTs. So like the Class 91s, those were so powerful that unlike an InterCity 125, we'd have a power car at both ends. In this case, you'd have it at one end only, and 6,300 horsepower. So, but a Class 90 has, let's have a look, where is it? 7,860 horsepower. And like I say, it's basically the same thing as a Class 87. So they were going to call them Class 87-2s. So 87-Os were the standard ones. 87-101 was the thyristor controlled special one. And then the 90s would have been 87-2s. However, with it coming up to the 90s, we're going to call them Class 90s, and then the 91s as well. So it's like the new generation for the 90s. New generation of trains. Hello everybody, thank you for watching. So they built 50 of them, and they started in 3 colour schemes. So let me just switch over here. So the first ones, let me just take a drink, my voice is a bit grumbly. So the first 15 Class 90s were painted in InterCity livery. This is InterCity Swallow, and when my computer wakes up and realises what I'm asking it to do. Come on, start. Come on, hard drive, wake up. Why is this not? It seems to be stuck. I'll do it in a moment. I hope. And my computer's somewhat frozen. Ah, I hear the hard drive wait, click. Hopefully it'll do it any second now. Come on. What's going on here? Oh gosh. Ah, there we go. Just trying to get it to do a number of things. Oh, nice one, Kelly. Good to hear. Okay, so here we go. This is the InterCity Swallow ones. So InterCity Swallow, as you can see, it's got a white band at the bottom, your standard red and yellow InterCity stripes. This is actually a shade of orange. This is the same orange as you get on Rough Red Soul Bar, so like Class 20s in grey with a red soul bar, or you know, VDA, VEA, so you know, VAA vans in grey with the yellows, with the you know, orangey red stripe at the top, same colour. And then this is Falcon Grey, which is a darker shade, is a slightly browner shade. But so yeah, this was the new generation. This is at the EDL, Engineering Development Unit at Derby Works. Sorry, Derby Railway Technical Centre. So, like I say, the idea here is that you'd have your Raker Mark IIIs with your DVT at the back end there. So that was the first livery, the first 15 of them. You know, those were done for InterCity, for InterCity itself, and then there were more on the end of them, so the first 25 were painted in InterCity livery, of which the first 15 were owned by InterCity. Then there was mainline livery, which is let's find a good one. Which is this livery. So this is the mixed traffic livery. So as you can see, it's got the red and white stripes for InterCity, but it's painted like a coach effectively. It's got the tan on the bottom, and the white doesn't wrap around the edges, you know, or have the white roof either. So yeah, that's the primary part behind it. So it also had a cast BR logo up here as well, and so the whole point of the mixed traffic locos were they could do InterCity work, or they could do freight work. So for example, they would use these on, you know, something like a Freightliner train, or on a Speedlink train, or even steel trains that were coming down from Moss End near Glasgow down, and they would go as far as Warrington, and then they would change to diesel traction to take them into Wales. So that's the way the system worked back then. Excuse me, my voice is a bit crackly. So that was that one. And then finally, sorry, I didn't say, Those were from 90026 to 36, and then finally there was Rotherham distribution, like this, like this. Actually, not like that. The numbers are low. That's why. There we go. Like this. So at first, to get their mileage runs in, they'd be using one of the InterCity trains. The first time I went to Manchester, the first time I came to the Northwest, I went to Crewe with a friend, and it was the first time I got to see, AC electrics. Really, I think for those who don't already know, I used to go to boarding school, and that's how I got into trains, because I was commuting every other weekend from home in Devon to Doncaster, where the school was, boarding school was, and every other weekend, so on a Friday afternoon, they'd send me home after dinner, and it would be 5 hours on a train with nothing to do, just sitting there, and you could only look out of a window for so long, or listen to a Walkman, or read a book or something, and it was just boring. And so I was moaning about it one day, and someone said, well, why don't you get the train numbers? And that's effectively how I became a train spotter. And, well, the trains, I'd get an InterCity 125, and that would go into Birmingham New Street, and then it would go back down to the southwest. But, I didn't really that was about the only place I could find AC electrics on that route. Obviously, Class 91s started to appear just as I was finishing school, and I accidentally had some superpower haulage when I went up to Leeds on the wrong train. Oops. But anyway, so they brought them out in Rotherham distribution livery. So these were going to be the primary freight locos, and like the mainline ones before, they would be used on freight trains, or for the ambulance going by, or sometimes they might do freight work. Passenger work, because, for example, in the evening, on the weekend, when the main city locos might be getting, their maintenance checks, they could borrow them. But later on, they sort of changed the policy. They wanted to have fixed ownership. So, for example, of the InterCity Swallow liveried ones, 16 to 20 was shared usage. They were shared between InterCity and parcels. And obviously parcel trains run at night more, so they'd run InterCity trains during the day, and at night, when the traffic got less, they would reuse them for parcel trains during the night time. So as the railways sort of changed a bit, I wouldn't be so surprised, Kaz. Actually, okay. Why can't I? Okay, no matter. So yeah, we've got the three main original colour schemes as they came out of works. Well, it wasn't too long before parcels, owned their own locos, and that was all cool. But they wanted their own. Allocation. They received their own allocation, and so that's when they came up with Rail Express Systems livery. So this came out in October 1991, and it was quite revolutionary as a design. It was very similar to the old Parcels Red livery, which is red on the bottom, a dark grey on the roof, executive dark grey on the upper body, and onto the roof with your standard orange stripes on it. This was a slight departure of that, because it didn't go all the way across. It was also designed by Roundel, who are the people behind the freight livery, but the subsector of rail freight livery. The main difference that they did compared to Parcel's livery, other than this piece here where it, it terminates here and have these sort of boxes, that you can see it's like almost like a set of steps, the boxes, and then these large blue rectangles. So when they the difference is that this grey here is actually a shade of, it's like a very dark shade of blue. It's like dark grey with just a tiny bit of pale blue in it, and it just gives it a little tint. So yeah, like I say, I actually really like this livery. Not as keen on it on 47s. Because effectively you got an old loco with a new livery on it, whereas this was a new loco with a new livery on it, so it worked well. The only time that it was a problem in terms of application was on the opposite side, where you can see the blue rectangle goes through one of the fans, and it did actually, the livery did actually show something that was wrong with the old the old Hornby model, because the fans aren't in quite the right size or shape. They're a little bit under scale, and so it doesn't really show properly. But no matter. So yeah, there's your so these were done from 90016 to 90020. So the next livery to pop. Oh, sorry, I missed a piece. So we need to go back to rail freight again, and back to this picture. So because you had because you had the sectorization system where every sector had its own locomotives for its own usage, and they would diagram for them. Yeah, they would diagram to them for the need. So you might have X amount of Freightliner trains a day, and you need to have a loco for that, and X amount of Speedlink type trains, and you need the right amount for that, and car trains, and so on. So you need a specific set of locos plus spares, so that if there's maintenance work needs doing, and diesel locos are far less reliable than electrics. Electrics are more powerful, but they're also much more reliable, because at the end of the day, electric loco like this, other than things like your transformers going pop, because you've got lots of voltage, there are very few moving parts in one of these. You've got your traction motor blowers, so it's just a fan, and you've got the traction motors themselves, but like very little is moving. It's not like engines where you've got pistons and camshafts and things like that going on, So there's a lot more working parts in a diesel that you don't even get with electric locos. So what happened was they were all built in the same design, and they had, if we look a little closer, you can see how it's got a rubbing plate, and it's got a Buckeye coupling, and there's your electric train heating stuff. So there's your output, it goes to a receptacle on the other side behind that buffer, and then you've got the TDM jumper cables that go, that are in clips here, and they, you just pull the lever towards you, the clip comes out, and then you can clip it into your coaches, either through the pin, the 3-pin plug that's on here and on the opposite side of the coach, or in this case, the DVT's got a little hatch, and behind it is one of the TDM jumper cables, and you can just plug it in, to the locomotive, and you got the TDM, so it can go all the way down the train and have the DVT, or in this case, the TDM's not working properly, so they've had to use the loco on the other end, which does cause delays. And of course, TDM works fantastic for two reasons. Number one, it'll allow two locos to work together. So instead, it's an easier standard multiple working system. But also, it means that you don't have as many locos sitting around when it comes to intercity trains. So with a DVT, you can just push the train. Whereas with someone like Cross Country, where when I used to operate into Manchester with 86s and 47s, what would happen is a 86 would come in with a Raker Mark IIs, and then you'd have a 86 or a 47 parked up on on the approach lines, and that would then come along, couple up to it. They'd uncouple the loco that brought it in, and then it would be able to take it down to Plymouth or Bournemouth or wherever it was going. So it meant, by having DVTs, that you could maximise your usage of your locos. You effectively don't need as many of them. And this is the reason why Class 81s and 85s, the 82, 83, 84 classes, they really weren't as reliable, so they kind of culled those fairly quickly, especially the Class 83s. So it allowed them to make more usage out of the locos that they had, and they could delete some of the early AC models that came around from the 1960 electrification. 86s came in 1965. So, like I say, you've got on this is effectively all the 90s came out exactly the same, and they all had the rubbing plate that would push, so the buffers could be pushed in and rotated 90 degrees, so that would keep them in. You can probably just about make out it's in there. And then it's quite a small picture of that. And then there's the drop head Buckeye for coupling up to coaches, because if you've got a nice close coupling on it, you're not going to get the jerkiness that you get as the couplings kind of snap. You've got a bit more play in them. You can tighten it up with a screw link, that works as well. But between coaches, generally they use Buckeyes because they stay together and it's a good strong hold. So, well, unfortunately, InterCity kept nicking Rovit distribution locos, and they got kind of annoyed at this because if they borrow a loco, you suddenly can't use them for the things that you're supposed to be using them for. So you end up having to use maybe an old loco, or you have to end up using a pair of 86s instead of 190. So it becomes a nuisance. So what happened was Rovit Distribution decided to make their locos unavailable. Or maybe not unavailable, but certainly less tempting to just borrow. And so what they did was they modified, they changed them, and they removed the rubbing plate and just plated over the where the rubbing mechanism, because it's basically like a big set of buffers. So they removed that and they put a standard screw link coupling in instead of the bucket drop head Buckeye. These aren't actually the correct ones I should be looking at. Let's see. Oh, there's one on a metals train. Bound to get this eventually. Still got rubbing plates on, you see. Oh, one quick thing. If we look, so there was a bit of a problem with these kind of jumper cables. Number one is they were a pain to connect to when you got if you got a shunter below and he's got to stick his hand up, between the rubbing plate and and then sort of pull it across the other side of it, and it was a nuisance. So what they did was they put these little pouches at the side, and then they just had them connecting in. That was a little later. There we go. Here's a perfect example of what I was looking at. So you can see how there's the little pouch at the back, and the cable just slots in there. But here's one of the ways that they disabled them. They effectively prevented them being used by removing the electric train heating output plug and the and it's not in the receptacle, because normally you'd have a big piece of wire coming out here, and it would coil up and just push in the receptacle, and then when you connect it to a rake of coaches, you pull it out of there and you plug it into the coach, and then on the coach it's got its own output, or with the plug in its own receptacle, and you remove it in the receptacle and you plug it into here. So that's how you connect for electric train heating. And then of course, obviously you've got your brake pipes that connect as well, and then but in fact, there we go, you can see here. So so they renumbered them in the Class 91 series. So it was and actually I think it might be in this it's actually in this magazine, if I remember correctly. There we go. So let me just so it's actually in this Fleet News down here, and at the bottom, let me just turn my lamp on because I'm a little bit tired. Okay, so it says, as predicted in rail, part of the rough rate distribution Class 90 fleet will be renumbered from July to reflect their dedicated duties. 20 of the class will be specifically diagrammed to replace 25 Class 85s and 90 turns where 80% availability is required. Locomotives to be renumbered 90126 to 150, retaining their original last two digits. Five other machines, 90021 to 25, will share some duties with InterCity and therefore not be renumbered. So it was so like I say, it took a little while for them to sort of thoroughly do it, but they did two main things. The number one is, they removed the rubbing plate and the drop head buckeye. They put a normal screw link on, and then eventually they removed the electric train heating socket, and then finally they reduced the speed to 75 miles per hour. So they were limited. I don't know whether they were physically limited, as in, yes, you could push the throttle forward, but it would only go to 75 miles an hour, or that in a software sense, or whether they could go faster, they just weren't supposed to. And of course, speed is what kills any vehicle. If you think about cars, if you accelerate as quick as speed, if you treat every green light as the start of a race and every brake light as emergency stop, it's pretty soon before your car's knackered. Well, with trains, not a lot different. So the more you tax them, the more you're going to wear them down. Well, this increases the availability of them because they're less likely to break down. So so over time, as you can see with this one, this is one where the socket has been removed. So the output, the electric train heating output, has been removed, and then you've just got the the receptacle, which is just empty. Now, several years ago, probably about more than 10 years ago now, they took the they turned them back into 90Os again, so they can be maximum use, so they can be leased out to, well, back then, leased out to Virgin, or leased out to First for the ScotRail sleeper trains, things of that nature. Or they could end up being borrowed for East Anglia, London Liverpool Street to Norwich services, or even East Coast Main Line. And so yeah, you could find them on all sorts of different trains. So later on, you had those liveries, and then I'm going to change to modelling, because I'm going to model all three. But in 1992, there was the Freight Connection exhibition. It was at the NEC, and to commemorate it, they painted 4 locos with Freight Connection references. So the first one were there was to symbolise sort of growing European usage, and especially with the upcoming Channel Tunnel coming very soon, they decided that they would paint 3 Class 90s in European schemes. So this is the Belgian scheme on 91 to 8. Then they did the German scheme, and it's somewhat amusing now because this loco is now in DB Schenker or DB livery, cargo livery, which is very, very similar, except for the end is a bit different really. But yeah, so there's the German one, and this out of the 3 of them is my favourite. It was the first one I saw at Leicester Open Day, which, oh, there it is. There you go, Leicester Open Day. Somewhere walking between all these locos is me. And then finally, there was the French version, and that was and here it is. So so this is based upon the French Cybec locomotives, the livery wise, a darker sort of slate grey. Well, Rough Distribution were kind of impressed with the look of it, and so they decided that they would have a little try at doing their own colour scheme. And so they did. So to trial the idea, they did 9136. So I had Rough Distribution lettering on it, Rough Distribution logos, and they dropped it down a bit. I mean, you can see this doesn't really match very well. But yeah, so that was the first attempt at it. But yeah, I don't know if it still looks like that now. I think that looks awful now because it's lost all the information, all the interest in it. But it looks like a slightly orangey yellow. To be honest, I don't really like this because it's kind of a half and half livery. So upon the evaluation of that, they decided to tweak their livery slightly, that livery again, and so they ended up with this livery, which is the Rough Distribution European version. And Class 47s were the first loco to be done was a 47 216, I remember correct, 217, if I remember correctly. And on one end it had the little tiny 3 tunnel logo markings like you would find on Class 92s. So another thing that happened just after this livery started coming in, they decided that they would replace the clipped oleo buffers, so circle buffers with the flat top and bottom, and they fitted European style buffers like you would find on cargo wagon, bogie vans and things. So and you can see here how there it is, still a 91, and it's got the electric train heating isolated. And later on it was refitted and it became O's once more. Let's see. There you go. So there's an example of an O, and you can see how the electric train heating is back active again. So you can see how the plug goes down there, connects up, and then goes up onto the plugs into the loco's electric train heating system. So, excuse me for jump my lips then. So those were the colour schemes that were done. Now, as the railway changed, um, things were privatised. So, just before privatisation, 1996. In 1995, all the they decided to split up multiple companies ready for privatisation. So, for example, all the InterCity elements were changed into their own little franchises. So, or pre-franchise, really. So, InterCity West Coast Main Line. So, InterCity West Coast was one, and that became Virgin, and InterCity East Coast, that was what became GNER, and then and so on. So you had different ones. Ridge Railways was done the same way. Ridge Railways Central, that was what became Central Trains. Ridge Railways Northwest, that became Northwestern Trains. That was a management buyout. And then there was Arriva. They went with Northern Spirit on the northeast. Later on, they were merged together, and now we've got what we call the Northern franchise. But Wales and West was another, and then later on, that's just all of Wales, and then So in the run-up to the privatisation part, Railfreight Distribution, which used to do Freightliner trains and lots of other things as well, car trains, vans, tanks, all sorts of things. They had their stuff split into two, and so they ended up creating a new Freightliner company. So it was Freightliner 1995, and unfortunately, Railfreight Distribution, kind of a little bit horrible to Freightliner. They ended up giving them the crappy 47s that were they were really close, or were almost overdue an overhaul. So they ended up having the crappiest, worst locos around, the ones that were either ready to be withdrawn or ready to be overhauled. So it cost them a lot of money to get them done up. But they also were required to give Freightliner Class 86s and Class 90s. And they got 10 Class 90s. They got the last 10. 9150 was stopped being used, was used as spares. But the rest of them have been working, and they've got 9016 since then, which was owned by EWS, but they've later been sold. I read in the latest Rail Express magazine that they've gone and bought several of the I think it was 19003 to 15, so Great Anglia are ceasing using Class 90s on the Great Eastern Line, and so they've gone and sold them on from Porterbrook as a franchise, as a Roscoe rolling stock company. Porterbrook has now sold them to Freightliner. So this was a new colour scheme that they brought out, and it's basically rail freight livery, two-tone rail freight livery with a triangle logo, and that triangle logo goes back to the 1965 when Freightliner flats were created. They had that design element to it. But they kept the Crew Electric depot plaques because they were still allocated to Crew, and of course it was only until a few years ago, when a new site at Basford Hall, a new depot at Basford Hall was opened, that they started being serviced there. So yeah, I actually quite like this livery. It's not too in your face. It's nice, and it's a stylish livery anyway. I always did like the rail freight livery, but in it with the addition that they've put this Freightliner lettering and the logo on the end. So, and of course you can see now how they're O's again. So, simple livery. Well, later on they decided that they would go for a slightly different version as the Class 90, so as the Class 66s came along. They decided that they would modify, create a brand new livery, and this was the Freightliner version that they came out with. And sadly, I've not seen any decals done for this yet, because unfortunately, the livery is different on either side. This is a big logo on this side, the side that's got 2 fans, and on the opposite side, it's got 5 fans, so you have to squeeze it down the bottom. So, yeah, and I quite like this livery. It's simple, it's effective, and it catches you. Yep, it's green, it's Freightliner. It's pretty much that simple, really. However, they've modified the livery since. Oops, sorry, I just went back to the same thing. They modified the livery and they went to this Power Hall livery. Personally, I don't like it. I don't like the grey, and I don't like the way it swishes up and down. I don't know. I just think it's easier to just follow the lines of the train. It makes more sense to do it that way. But no, they decided that they wanted to have swooshes because swooshes, that's what people seem to do these days when it comes to livery design. I find that a bit dull myself, but so that's effectively your Freightliner stuff. And of course, in recent months, they've come up with a new colour scheme, which I haven't saved it on, which is an orange livery. I wonder if it's in this. No. So, when it comes to the Roughwick distribution stuff, well, Roughwick distribution was bought by EWS. So EWS was formerly Wisconsin Central, and they bought the 3. They bought the Load Haul, Mainline Freight, and Transrail freight companies, and they also bought Rail Express Systems for the parcel stuff, and later on they bought Roughwick Distribution as well. So because they owned the parcel locos, obviously that was one of the type elements that would do this, and the I could do this. I could do that, Kelly. And then, of course, Roughwick Distribution ones as well. So I actually quite like this livery. A lot of people describe it as maroon, but it's not maroon. It's basically a dark red. Maroon is more sort of a browny shade, a bit of brown in it, but this isn't. It's just a darkened, darkened red colour, and it's got a gold band in it. And then they also have these reflective strips at the bottom, because in America, where they got open level crossings, they kept having problems with people driving into trains. I mean, as if you can't see a train zooming by on a level crossing. No, they crashed into it. So they put these things. But, it kind of works. It makes you see them in the dark. So that's kind of nifty. But, I mean, this is 18. That was one of the parcels locos. Just taking a drink. So... So since then, EWS has been bought by DB Deutsche Bahn Livery, a German state railway company, and they've been, rebranding, and of course they've dropped the Schenk a bit now, and they've just got DB Cargo is the so yeah, they just sort of modified that down. Nice thing is that it does blend quite nicely. The red is a very similar red to the LNER coaches or Virgin coaches on the East Coast Main Line. So now on the East Coast Main Line, they had a bit of a problem. They had Class 91s, but the 91s weren't as reliable as they expected them to be. So unfortunately, they had to keep borrowing them from. They had to lease some of the 90Os. If you remember when I was reading out before, 90O to 1 to 25 are going to remain normal. They're going to remain the same because they get used by InterCity as well. And so that was the plan, that so they used them on the East Coast Main Line as, replacing a Class 91. And they would do this generally they use them on the Leeds line because it's not as long, but also remember that Class 90s are limited to 110 miles an hour, whereas the 91s do 125 and are capable of doing more. So because they needed to lease a loco, they decided, GNER, they decided that they would paint one up in GNER colours. So this is exactly it. It was only the one loco. Didn't carry GNER lettering. It just carried the blue with the orange stripe with the number in it there. To be honest, not very keen on this livery. Looks nice in the sun, but if it's on a gloomy day, it can look a bit grubby. And of course, you can see it can get a bit mucky as well, because it's so bland, really. So, for the West Coast Main Line, the franchise went to Virgin. And Virgin came out with this colour scheme, which I think isn't too bad. It's red, so Virgin, but got the grey bands on the ends, and these white stripes kind of blend it so you can see a length of a train. You can see there's a bit of a bump there. Normally everything would be in a line there, but it wasn't too complicated, and it was quickly applied. So now Virgin didn't really do much other than paint them, really. The only real change, and I'm going to have to open up a new window for it, and you may have to wait for a second for it to load, because I'm going to go to DVTs. Yep, still taking a few seconds to load. There we go. Trains, when it opens. Come on. I should have opened this earlier. Okay, so coaches, Mark 3s, West Coast Main Line, DVT, privatised, and Virgin. When it opens, okay. So Virgin, they did some modifications to the DVTs. So DVTs originally, in the original InterCity livery, they had the same buffers as the Class 91s. They had the rubbing plate, the drop head buckeye, and they had skirting. But those things have been removed on the Virgin model. They also modified the front end headlight section. So instead of having like slatted grille on the front, it's got these sort of V-shaped pieces. Now, this is a bit of a disappointment, for people that buy the model, because, like I say, it doesn't have the skirting, doesn't have the, even the InterCity model doesn't have the skirting, doesn't have a rubbing plate, doesn't have any of the parts that made it old reference, including, of course, the slatted grille. So if you buy a Mark III DVT and InterCity livery, it's not correct. It isn't, because no skirting, no rubber plate, no drophead buckeye, and these are, these modernised horn covers are on it as well. I have 4 of them, of which all 4 have lost them because someone I painted up a pair of Great Air Anglia models for someone, for a couple of people, and I used the parts off of my models to modify them. I was going to be removing them anyway, so it wasn't going to make any difference. So, but the Class 9... Oh, actually, but while I do that, allow me to just show you what I mean by the DVT. If I just go back to InterCity. There you go. You can see how it's got the slatted grills. It's got the... Yeah, there we go. So it's got the slatted horn cover. It's got, rotatable audio buffers with the clip, clipped off top and bottom. It's got the drophead buckeye, and it's got the rubbing plate. So in order to, to make one, you're going to need to, make up these parts. Now, I did a drawing several years ago. Never had the chance to, to put it into action. A few weeks ago, last week, it arrived. I got my 3D printer and bought a new 3D printer. Had one before, but can never really get it working. But I bought this new resin bath type one, and that one looks promising because it does 40 layers per millimeter. So I've done a drawing for the skirting. All I need to do is test it to see whether it will fit on the DVT. So with any luck, it's something that I could upload to Shapeways so you can buy them yourself, retrofit your model. I might try and do a comprehensive detailing pack, which would have the skirting, have the buffers, have the rubbing plate, and have the horn cover, so you can just chop them up, splice them in, and you're good. So I could do that. That might work. And I also would like to do electric train heating sockets and plugs and things. So, but yeah, as you can see, it makes quite a difference to the look of them to have all those parts on. The buffer beam kind of looks cluttered and detailed, whereas the Virgin one just looks a bit bland. And the skirting makes a real difference. But they kept getting knocked off by vandals or little bits and bobs, or vibrations, pigeons getting in the way or something as well. So, but anyway, so this was the Virgin livery, and eventually these were replaced by Pendolinos. On the so for the sleeper trains on the West Coast Main Line, on the London Euston up to Glasgow section, and then they would separate off for behind class 37s or 67s, or nowadays the new 73-9s, and of course now they've even replaced the coaches with these new Mark V coaches. So loads of these Mark III sleepers have been withdrawn and will be cut up eventually, probably quite soon. And some of the coaches have been gone to Preserve Railways. They're very good for having staffing. So imagine you've got someone who's a part of a railway, and they drive up from Kent or something. And then, let's say the East Lancashire Railway. Let's say there's a member of the East Lancashire Railway, and the only place they could, put their loco was there. So while they're doing the work on it on the weekend, they could basically stay in, use one of the cabins there to stay in over the weekend, over one night, and then go back home on Sunday evening to go back to work the next day, that kind of thing. So they're useful for that kind of thing. So these were owned by EWS. You can see it's got EWS lettering, and it's just been painted in first logos with ScotRail to go with the Caledonian Sleeper. I actually think this livery is quite pretty. It's quite nice. It's a nice shade of blue. It's not as dark as GNER, so it's a mid-blue shade. I don't know. I kind of like it. Yeah, I'm using ACDC 9. So yeah, this is basically a freight loco. I mean, it's got the continental buffers and it's got no rubbing plate. That's all been removed, and it just simplifies things that can't go. You know, the less you've got, the less things can go wrong. But yeah, that's about it. But it's a nice colour scheme, and it's got a bit of pink on as well, I suppose. In more recent years, one was loaned out to DRS. That was a very short-lived thing, but it looks quite nice. And then, oh, sorry, I missed one there. You know, there's an Eddie Stobart, Malcolm liveried one, like this. It just kind of looks weird with the skirting like that, but you know, sort of Blue Mountain, mountain stuff. Quite a nice vinyl job, I'd say. I believe there's a vinyl available for people who want to renumber theirs, so repaint theirs. So now, let me just drop that there. Okay, so the next element was 1. So, so 1, you know, the idea behind 1 is that when they privatised the railway, they split it into multiple parts. Excuse me, that's police car by the sounds of it. In fact, 2 police cars. Anyway, so what they did was they split it up into multiple companies. So out of London Liverpool Street, you had the wagon stuff, West Anglia Great Northern, so that's the stuff that goes up to Ely and on to King's Lynn. Then you had the Great Eastern Line, which is the kind of stuff that goes like down to Clacton and you know, Shenfield, and also on the oh crikey, what was it called? Chigwell, and you know, stuff like that. So you know, basically commuter trains, and then you had the express trains going up to Norwich and to Harwich. So you know, they came. So what happened was, rather than have multiple companies, they decided to sort of merge them together to make a bigger franchise, and this was what they turned into 1. It was one big franchise. So sorry, I needed a drink there. I'd love to pour more. Ready? Yep, generally I'm talking about class 90s here. Okay, so so this went on okay, fine, and not only that, you know, they modified their class 90s as well. This was the first thing that was really changed on them, and you can see how, I mean, this was the first one to be done. They went for kind of like a RoboCop blue colour. It was like grey with a bit of blue in it. You can see it was quite dark and, you know, miserable, but the problem is it was a metallic blue, and the problem with metallic paints is that they can they can start to sort of break down because they cost more money to for a start, because they're literally having little bits of metal in the paint, tiny flecks of it. But it just it quickly got sort of dirty, and it just didn't look very so great. So they went and modified it, and they changed it to this sort of a sort of slightly powdery blue shade, and I think that works. I think they made a good decision there. So there we go. So well, eventually the franchise comes up, and so they ended up getting National Express managed to get the franchise. So they basically painted out the rainbow stripes on the end. They put a white sticker on it with National Express East Anglia on it, and they came out with their own colour scheme. So, oops, too far. So here it is. This is the National Express livery, which is a kind of slightly, it's a gunmetal, metallic colour with a bit of white in it, and then the coaches have the gunmetal ends, dark blue doors, white body size, which I think is a big mistake, because the muck gets on the bottom, and then it's got these kind of like linking logos on the end of National Express. Like I say, it doesn't look too bad, but again, as I pointed out, you can see how dirty it can get. It's just white on the bottom of coaches just doesn't work too well. This is the reason why they use tan on InterCity, because that hides the brake dust that comes off locos as they slow down, and coaches. Sorry. But I forgot to mention something. One of the changes that One did when they started, they changed the horn covers to something the same as what the DVTs had got when Virgin had overhauled them. And in fact, sadly, you can see this one has scored a pigeon, but you can see there's the different horn cover design. So now Bachmann have done I've done the slatted version. And this is an etch, so I hope that if they decide to do the Greater Anglia, one rebranded one National Express, rebranded National Express and Greater Anglia colours for the first 15, that they change it, and just so you know that. So on the Great Eastern, back in 1990, they started to get the DBSOs from Scotland. They gave them an overhaul at Derby Litchurch Lane, and then they went down to the southwest to Devonport Dockyard, where a company put on the fitted them with TDM, because although the cables on the front end of DBSOs were the same in the ScotRail as they were in InterCity livery and later livery, they didn't have they used a railway clearinghouse jumper cable system for transmitting the data down the train to the locomotive, but they changed them to TDM, time division multiplexing. So they modified the system. Well, eventually what happened was the Pendolinos arrived, and they didn't need. In fact, I'm going to go back to one again. So let's see. It opens. So at first you can see there's the slatted grills, but later we'll see in a moment. In fact, there we go. You can see there's the DVTs compared to the locos, and then later on, and I know I've got pictures of it. This was the day it started. I'm sure that was when they got the horn covers changed. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was during the rebranding. Yeah, it must have been during National Express rebranding. I thought I had that right. There we go. But you can see, there you go. There's the modified horn covers. So, yeah, little tweak there. So as National Express started, removing the rainbow stripes and putting the stickers on, then they kind of screwed up with it, and they didn't get the franchise. They lost their franchise, and then so it became gone too far again. And then it went to Greater Anglia. And as I forgot to mention, finish off from before, there we go. So as I forgot to finish off before, the DBSOs and Mark IIs, when the electrification was done in 1989, I think it was, they had as the Class 158s were starting to emerge, they displaced the Class 47-7s and Mark 3, 2 and 3 coaches with DBSOs. So the DBSOs went to InterCity, the Mark 3s went to InterCity, the locos went to Network South East mainly, some went to Rail Express Systems, and then or parcels rather, and then Rail Express Systems as it was branded, and then excuse me, I need another drink. Oh, yawn as well, crikey. And so they ran that fine for a while, and they had in Anglia turquoise livery, and one set managed, one DBSO made it into one livery. Don't know why, but as Pendolinos came about in from 2000 until about 2002, eventually that enough trains, as the Pendolinos reached full full takeover on the West Coast Main Line, the coaches and locos became redundant, so they ended up being transferred to Great Eastern for London to Norwich express services. Now, this was good for Anglia because, of course, they'd been stuck with 1965 era 86s and late 60s into the 70s air-conditioned Mark IIs, DZs and Fs, and DBSOs that were second-hand from Scotland, and they ended up with 90s that were from the 80s, and the coaches which were from the 70s, and DVTs that were from the 80s as well, 88 kind of period, 1988, 89, 90. I seem to remember them being built. So they ended up with more modern stock, better quality stuff. So that's how they've ended up, and as I mentioned earlier, these are now being replaced by new Class 755s, and as a result, 90s are going to, who knows what's going to happen to the coaches. They probably end up being scrapped, and the locos have now been bought by Freightliner from Porterbrook, who owned them before. So that's the Greater Anglia story, and that may be the end. Yeah. So that's largely the end for the 90s. Now, what are the differences, detail differences? Well, so I collect pictures from all sorts. So, Class 90s, largely, of the differences I've already mentioned, how the InterCity, express ones. Here there's our rubber plate, and the drophead Buckeyes down here, and then there's the electric train heating, and the rotary buffers, and on the roof, a couple of big vents, and the standard equipment there. Now, if you notice here, there's a small little knob. I don't know what it does. Most of the time, I don't know what these things do. I just see what they are, see that they're there. So, in more modern, in recent years, they've managed to get some a new modification, and it might be on that one. I'm not sure. I did see it recently. There it is, yeah. So instead of having a small little knob, it's got a larger one. Now, they had the aerials for the radio telephone stuff, but they've gained this new one. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's a part of the new radio system that they use, but I might be wrong. I don't know. All I know is it's there. Now, on the Bachmann model with the Powerline livery, the Power Hall livery, they have this. So it's good that Bachmann have done the body shell modifications to either have the little knob piece, as it is with the InterCity and Roughit Distribution one, or this large, top hat style, drum. So that's one little thing. And then there's a standard thing that is different, and that is the battery charger. So the battery charger is this box that's here. So here's the battery box, and this is the battery charger. And there's two versions of this. This is a tall sort of square box, and it's got what looks like a heatsink, sort of ventilated heatsink system. And this can be found on the InterCity model and on the Powerliner model. And then and then the other version, if I can find one, and here is the other style of the battery box, the battery charger system, and it's this small rectangular shaped box with a sort of riveted panel on the top. So, and this is what can be found on the Roughit Distribution model. So now again, Bachmann have done very well in order to do this modification. So if you want to model a loco, then it's advisable, if you want to renumber it, it's advisable to go and look and see which version it's got. Now, when it came to my own modelling, so when it came to my own modelling, I had to actually I can modify this now. I haven't done it since. These can be changed into blue because blue means got. So when it came to doing mine, the way I noticed that, so remember that the rougher distribution one has got the box. So if we look, there's FD, rougher distribution. So we've got this one, and we've got this one, and that's great. But 9146 has got the vent version. So I needed to get an extra model in order to be able to swap bodies. And so that's why I'm doing, in fact, let's move that, make that blue as well. And so that's why I'm doing a mainline one now. I mean, I could have waited 6 months. You know, who knows? Beckman may announce it later on this year, but they may announce it next year or the year after. You know, I could wait, but because, you know, I mean, I really wanted a mainline liveried 90 anyway. However, this one's got a vent, that one's got a box, and so it was easy to just buy a rougher distribution one and then just swap the bodies. So those two will swap the chassis, or, you know, just swap the bodies on the chassis, and then this one can, you know, this one can be repainted, and then the other, you know, all three of the InterCity ones have got vents, so that was easy. And then finally, as I mentioned, I bought 8. So I bought 7 recently, and I already had an InterCity one. So my purposes behind my models here are these two are InterCity ones, so imagine Mark III's with a DVT on the end. This one is, and if I just swap over here, now going from details into what I'm modelling. Oops, too far. Modelling. So I'm doing several 91 ones, and then a fewer number of 91 O's. So there's the InterCity ones there. These two are parcels ones, and these ones are rail freight ones, but carried, you know, were used on the East Coast Main Line, so they could be used on Freightliner trains, or Speedlink trains, or you know, car trains, or whatever, vans, or they can be used on intercity trains on the on the East Coast Main Line, even on the West Coast Main Line, I suppose. But you can see how there's the rubber plate there, and if we look at this picture of an intercity liveried one, it's got it removed, and it's not, I've got some newly overhauled bogies by the looks of it as well. So the third one, this is how I'm modelling it. So I'm going to model it with the, you know, I'm going to make some triangle plates and stick them on, you know, remove the rubbing plate, remove the drop bed buckeye. Although ironically I use KD couplers for loco, so it's gonna end up with a working buckeye. And then so yeah, it's keeping the original buffers, but just ending up with a bit. I'm basically going to freightified it, so this can work on a Freightliner train, or can be used with you know, on East Coast Main Line stuff. And if we scroll enough, there's one at Doncaster. There it is at Doncaster on a Raker Mark IVs. There it is on a Freightliner train. So it's one of those locos that can be used on multiple things, and you can see how it's got the ventilated box there. That's on a Mark IV set. Do I have another picture? Oh, there's an unusual Rail Freight General liveried 86 there. Now there's with Mark IV coaches. And again. There we go, there's Mark IVs again. So that's my plan for this loco. And then I have another one which will be in rougher distribution, and as you can see, this is it with when it opens, on a Raker Mark IVs at Doncaster there. And on top of that, if you remember earlier when I was talking about the Rough European liveried locos, there were 4 locos that were done for that, and this was the 4th. So there was the British one, the Belgian one, the French one, and the German one. And you can see freight connection. And the other one was like fret connection. And then Vretverbunding and Fretverbundingen. And that's probably terrible German. But, you know, so this is how I'm going to model it. You know, so with the rubbing plate removed and drop head buckeye removed, but it's still a 90 with electric train heating. So I can use it on the East Coast main line, or I can use it on the West Coast main line kind of setup. Because the way my system will, when I build my layout, it'll have overhead wires, and I'll just run it, you know, run trains as West Coast main line 1 week, and the week after I might run it East Coast main line or something, or maybe even Great Eastern if I wish. I do quite like Great Eastern because, you know, I do like the DBSOs and 86s, but I also like the sheer variety of EMU types you found there. So yeah, this is the style that I'm doing it in. I mean, if we look at my model, you know, at my the details for the Class 90s, it's still going to have the clipped oleo buffers, but the rubbing plate is removed. It hasn't got an RFID tag, very few had at that point. And the RFID tag is, I think I might have it. Something like this. It's another little thing that isn't on the Beckman model. So it's a little box thing here, and it can be triggered by line side equipment to tell trains where it is. There you go, you can see it again there with a bigger picture. But yeah, there's the little RFID tag. These are the kind of things that you get attached to clothes in a shop so that people don't steal them, although they still do. So it was added later, but you can see how it was repainted in the new Rough European version of distribution, and you know, on Mark IVs, and had the buffers changed later. But I'm doing it in an earlier period. Something else to note as well, in fact, is probably easier if I just do it on 90s. So the original Rough distribution livery had, when it opens, so the original Rough distribution has yellow up the sides, but the ones that were repainted, remember they were originally InterCity livery and then they were gradually painted into Rough distribution livery like this. If we compare here, you can see how it's black around the sides. So that's a easy one. There you go. See yellow there. Person waving out the window. And then there you go. So black around the window there. There you go. That's a good one. In fact, there's an interesting photo there because if you look, you can see how the skirting's come off. So you can see what it looks like underneath the skirting. But like I say, black around the sides there. So when I do my 90022 model, I'll be, you know, masking off a bit there and respraying there to get that black around the window edge. So yeah, I think so the way this whole thing works is these are my InterCity ones. So they've got clipped oleo buffers, they've got the rubber plate, they've got the RFID tags, which will just be a little tiny piece of plastic card. And then this one has the rubbing plate removed. And, you know, depot plaques and arrows aren't really relevant. The like I say, so these two and this one. So that's so I'm doing them in effectively slightly different times. I'm doing one that's got the rubbing plate as built, and this one's going to be have it removed. Still with clipped oleo buffers between them, and like I say, the difference in the box and the vent. And then this one is the passenger-y version, but still has it removed, and then plaques and arrows. And then 132, that's going to be a respray, so in the mainline livery, and one version is going to have the rubber plate, and the other version is going to have it removed. And then finally, my favourite 90 probably is res liveried 9019 penny black, and I just wanted it, and it's like, okay, it may come out and it's a challenge to paint because of the complexity of the res livery, but I'm up for the challenge. I did it on a a Hornby 90 about 15 years ago, more like 20 actually. So yeah, I mean, if we look at res livery, I mean, you can get a decal. So Fox Transfers do a decal for many years now, which what you do is you paint the grey across the top section, and then it's a decal that's this section here. And I've got a set of them, but I don't really like doing it because you can always see the line. So when I do it, I will just mask off this area very, very carefully, and then spray the rectangles on afterwards. So it'd be a lot of masking, a lot of challenge, but I'm up to the task. So it'd be nice to have a parcels liveried 90 with a rake of parcels coaches behind it. It's one of those things that I've always loved. In fact, if we go to modelling and O and 19, let's see what we got. Parcels train, which is what its primary job will be. So you can see it with a nice set of ends there. So yeah, that looks nice. I like that. So that's why I'm going for that. It's amusing how often you'd find them on passenger trains. When it comes to photos, people often take pictures of trains on passenger trains, but not so much on parcel trains. But like I say, the thing I like about parcels is you've got so many different colours. Lots of different colours, different colour locos. Some stuff that's old locos, but there you go. There's a matching set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fans. 1, 2, 3 of them are BGs, super BGs, and 3 are super govs. And I don't have super govs or super BGs. The nearest I've got is tell a lie. I've got 4 super govs because I'm doing one of the PCV 4 sets. So it's PCV, 2 super govs of PCV, and I've got 2 sets of those. So yeah, that's what I'm doing with 90s. So I thought you might find that a bit of history about Class 90s interesting, and so yeah, that was that then. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. So in this issue of could I take a quick look at 90-001 in Virgin livery, please? Sure. I think I've got a picture of 90-001. It's not that one, it's there, and 90 privatised Virgin. I'm not. I don't know where a picture of 90001 is, but what was that one? I think that's 001 actually. But yeah, the reason why Chris Udden is asking this is because I'm painting one for him. That'll be happening this weekend. But there we go. So tomorrow I'm going to strip it down. I haven't had time to start this week. I've been really tired. Turns out I've got a bit of a thyroid condition at the moment, so they want to get that sorted out. I've got to go to the doctor soon about that. Got an appointment for a week on Monday, but or was it a week on Tuesday? No matter. Anyway, so this is what it'll look like when it's done. And I had to ask him to get the InterCity one because the InterCity one has got the vertical, the larger battery charger type. But like I say, eventually it'll look like this, and it'll look really good. So, yeah. Okay, so the second thing I'm going to read out to you. I'm going to probably need to drink a couple of times through this because reading out, and I'll probably stumble a little bit because reading out is never always the easiest thing. I need to turn my lamp on so it might become a little bit brighter. So, what this is 1991 timetable review. Cross-country, the cross-country subsector of InterCity will benefit this year from InterCity 125 sets cascaded from the East Coast Main Line. Brian Perrin reviews the improvements that this will bring. So, like I say, this is a couple of pages of an article I thought might be interesting. So let me just first point out that the cross-country section of InterCity was effectively like a cross-country, and so instead of going from like Manchester to London, and everything generally goes to London, this is one that largely avoids London. Goes around the outskirts of it, or doesn't even go there at all. So, for example, you would have the northeast southwest route, which would go from, like Plymouth and Paignton up to Exeter, up to through Cheltenham, Birmingham New Street, Bristol, but Cheltenham, Birmingham New Street, across to Derby, Sheffield, and then we'll go up towards Leeds or Doncaster, and on to York and Edinburgh, as well as things like Manchester to Plymouth, Manchester, going down to Bournemouth, we go to Glasgow Central, down to Bournemouth, Poole, Brighton, things of that nature. Effectively where cross-country trains goes now, or would have gone, or used to go. They don't go to Brighton anymore. So here it goes. So, more InterCity 125s for cross-country. Unlike the other InterCity routes, which are London-orientated, the proportion of first-class business on cross-country routes is very much lower, and the traffic flows are more dependent on the traditional leisure market, such as the south coast and west of England. This is confirmed by market research. Another factor to emerge is that cross-country customers prefer timetable stability with services from the major provincial centres at convenient times, with a particular emphasis on morning departures and afternoon arrivals. Thus, while the 1991-92 timetable structure is largely unchanged, an influx of 11 InterCity 125 sets has enabled cross-country to make a number of train service improvements in two stages from July the 8th and September the 30th. Part of the case for the East Coast electrification was based upon the redeployment of InterCity 125s on other intercity routes. So we're talking about the East Coast Main Line from London to Edinburgh, and stopping places up from there. So going into Yorkshire and into to Leeds and to West and East Yorkshire at Hull, and then obviously continuing on to Inverness and Aberdeen. So so part of the case for East Coast electrification is based upon the redeployment of InterCity 125s on other intercity routes, enabling older coach stock to be withdrawn. From September 30th, when the InterCity 125 cascade will be complete, the cross-country fleet will consist of 23 InterCity 125s, 30 sets of good air-conditioned coaches, and the sleepers for overnight services between the south coast. This is something that got stopped pretty quickly after this. The west of England and Scotland. Some 70 early Mark II non-air-conditioned A, B and C Mark II coaches, 24 Mark II-D side corridor first brakes, and the remaining Mark I RBR buffet cars, catering cars, will be withdrawn from the service. The entire cross-country fleet, InterCity 125 and hauled stock, will be air-conditioned. At one stage, InterCity was considering the possibility of converting cascaded InterCity 125s into half sets with a modified D-rated power car and 5 trailers, one of which would have been equipped with a driving position. So think Mark III DBSOs. In the event, the most cost-effective option was to remain with 2 plus 7 sets, so 2 power cars and 7 coaches. They would offer more seats, can be reformed into 2 plus 8s at a later date should business grow, while 110 miles per hour is the likely operating maximum pending the introduction of ATP, which didn't happen. They retain their 125 mile per hour capability. Dependence on inefficient life-expired Class 47 diesels will also be further reduced. Above all else, the conversion program would have enabled the withdrawal from traffic of a number of unacceptable Mark III coaches for an extended length of time during the conversion. This was unacceptable. I don't know. It's bad writing there, wrote unacceptable twice. Anyway, the 11 sets moving over to cross-country will be reformed at a dedicated sub-fleet based at Craig and Tinney, Edinburgh. All cross-country and City 125s will be 2 plus 7 formed of 1 first-class coach, a TRSB, trailer second buffet, 4 trailer seconds plus TGS, trailer cars second. But the entire Craig and Tinney fleet will consist of vehicles equipped with short swing-link bogies. These are necessary to allow passage over the Network South East third rail network between Basingstoke and Weymouth. Now, just so you can see what I mean by that, let me find some pictures of InterCity 125 coaching stock. So, so if we look at this, let's see what we can find. A little bit not brilliant pictures here, but so maybe standards. Oh, not really showing very well. Okay, let me just double check something. Not in that one. Maybe in this, but it might be a bit late. No, not in that one. One of these two. I'm looking at the 93 book. No. Maybe it's in 96. There's a little picture in here. Sorry about this. Doesn't seem to be. I don't know where to put it now. But yeah, the let's look at. When it opens. Okay, so the swing link is a piece that kind of goes underneath, kind of curls underneath. It's been a while since I even looked at this. Problem is, I can't even. It's been such a long time, you know. But it basically is a piece that goes underneath, and it might touch the third rail if you're not careful. Part of me keeps wondering if they've changed it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's not important. Okay, let's just get back to the reading. Okay, train service changes discussed below have necessitated driver training on the City 125s at Bournemouth, Carlisle, and Glasgow. So subsection. So Anglo-Scottish InterCity 125s is generally your northeast southwest stuff. As a first stage, effective from July the 8th, 3 Anglo-Scottish services will be operated by InterCity 125s. They are Dorset Scott, departing at 06:55 from Aberdeen in the summer and 09:30 from Edinburgh during the winter. The Dorset Scott is routed by way of Newcastle and Leeds, departing at 12:04. Arrival at Poole is at 19:30. Northbound departure is at 8:40 from Poole, arriving in Leeds at 14:44, Newcastle at 16:23, and Edinburgh at 18:05. This is the first InterCity 125 on the Poole route and will cut the Edinburgh to Poole journey time by around 65 minutes. Also during the summer period, the northbound Cornishman at 09:25 from Penzance via Leeds and Newcastle is extended from Edinburgh to Aberdeen. This will provide the balance of the southbound Dorset Scott. So you can imagine Penzance all the way to Aberdeen. That's a hell of a distance. There used to be one that went to Inverness. Then there's the Devon Scott, departing at 09:15 from Aberdeen and 7:25 from Plymouth. This service, which is routed by way of Edinburgh and Carlisle, is accelerated by about 50 minutes. So that will go up the West Coast Main Line and then go on the Carstairs to Carstairs to Edinburgh section. Then we've got the Cornish Scot. This is, I think this might be the long one. Southbound departure is 0944 from Glasgow Central, arriving at Penzance at 2007, and 727 from Penzance to Glasgow Central, arriving at 1732. Journey time has been cut by about 25 minutes in each direction. This is in addition to the 60 minutes reduction introduced last year when the separate portion of the Edinburgh and Glasgow was terminated. Compared with 1989, the service has been accelerated by 1 hour 25 minutes. Moreover, InterCity 125 will allow the train to serve Gloucester. 6 other services will change over to InterCity 125 operation from September the 30th. They are, and let me just take a drink before I tell you. So, Wessex Scot. This service will run between Glasgow Central and Poole by way of West Coast Main Line, Birmingham, Oxford, Reading, and will be accelerated by about 30 minutes in each direction. Departure time will be 08:25 from Glasgow Central to Poole. In addition, in the northbound direction, this service will start from Bournemouth at 11:10. And then there's the 10:28 Stockport to Poole and 18:10 Poole to Manchester. By using the set off the Wessex Scot, this pair of services will also change over to InterCity 125 operation. The early service from Stockport will turn back at Bournemouth to form the 11:10 to Glasgow, and the 18:10 from Poole to Manchester will be provided by utilising the incoming Wessex Scot from Glasgow Central. In addition, the 8:18 Manchester to Poole and 15:40 Poole to Manchester service will be turned over to InterCity 125 operation from September the 30th. These services will revive the name the Pines Express. Liverpool to Edinburgh service reinstated. InterCity will re-enter the Liverpool-Scotland market from July the 7th. A locomotive hauled, so class 47 probably, yeah, maybe in 86. No, it'll be 47. A locomotive hauled service with change from diesel to electric traction at Preston will leave Liverpool at 09:05, arriving in Edinburgh at 12:30 southbound. The service is at 15:20. Arriving in Liverpool at 19:15. This new service will serve St Helens Central rather than St Helens Junction, which was the previous routing. Other Anglo-Scottish changes include to provide improved business service from the West Midlands to Glasgow, particularly for customers residing north of Birmingham. The existing 0657 Coventry to Edinburgh is revised to become the 1655 Glasgow Central, arriving at 11:17. This is much earlier than was previously possible, and it will enable a day's work in Glasgow by using the 1618 return service to Birmingham New Street. This service will be marked as the Midland Scot. A mid-morning service from Birmingham International to Glasgow Central will be introduced at 10:07, arriving at 14:50. The present 18:32 Glasgow Central to Birmingham via Manchester will run 2 hours later. So then we go on to the northeast-southwest. So northeast-southwest axis. During the summer, the existing 10:20 York to Birmingham is modified to become the new 8:20 service from Newcastle to Exeter via Leeds to provide additional seats to the west of England and so relieve the southbound Cornishmen. 14:41 York to Bristol is extended to Plymouth, arriving in at 21:42, replacing the present 16:18 from Manchester west of Birmingham. To To provide an additional early evening service out of Bristol, a new service is to be introduced at 15:55 from Exeter to Sheffield. Bristol Temple Meads departs at 17:13. This will also enable the hourly sequence of northbound departures from Birmingham New Street to be continued until 2058 rather. Because of poor loadings on the 0648 Cardiff to Newcastle and 1305 Newcastle to Cardiff will be diverted to run to and from Bristol Temple Meads. Connections are provided for Cardiff passengers at Bristol Parkway. And then the last section is Thames Valley services. By exchanging the destination of the 1518 from Manchester to Paddington, which will now run to Poole, with the 1614 from Liverpool, which will now run to Paddington, a two-hour pattern of departures from Birmingham New Street to Poole will now apply at 1306, 1506, 1706 and finally 1936. Departures from Birmingham New Street along the Thames Valley corridor through Coventry, Leamington Spa, Oxford run throughout during the day at XX06 minutes past the hour. Northbound services from Poole to Birmingham New Street and beyond are at 5:40, 6:40, 8:40, 10:40, 11:40, 13:40, 15:40, with a later departure at 18:10 from Poole. Finally, the afternoon service from Dover Western Docks to Liverpool will leave 3 hours earlier at 14:25, providing a more convenient time in the West Midlands and North West. The outgoings 0759 from Liverpool to Folkestone, which forms the afternoon return service, will now leave Liverpool at 0640 and terminate at Dover Western Docks instead of Folkestone. So I just thought that might be an interesting thing to see. Obviously it referenced InterCity 125, so they transferred InterCity 125 sets from the East Coast Main Line as Class 91s and Mark IVs took over their duties, and then those InterCity 125s were displaced. Some of them went down to the Great Western Line from London to London Paddington to the southwest and South Wales. But one of the other things that happened as a result of it was a whole bunch of coaches became spare, because the East Coast Mainline coaches, Intercity 125 rakes, were 8 coaches between 2 power cars. But the cross-country ones, as mentioned, they were limited, they had 7 coaches. So because of this, you ended up with a spare coach. Well, if I was to show you one of these loco books from 1990, I'll need to go to 1990 for that. So these are 1989 and 1990. So if I go to the coaches and so if we look at the Great Western ones here, you can see how a number of them have, some of them got 8 coaches and some of them have got 7. Well, because of the cascading of Intercity 125s for cross country, it allowed all the Western region ones to become full 8-car sets. So if I go back to this, as I didn't show you before, so if we look at the Western region ones there, you can see how all of them have now got 8 coaches, so they've been reformed. So yeah, basically what happened was they took a whole bunch of first class coaches, because you'd have 2 first class coaches, a buffet car, and then TSs until you've got your TGS at the back. And what they did was they shortened the train, took out the first class coach, then they modified it and turned it into a standard class coach, and then slotted it into one of the Great Western sets. So it was it was good for both parts. It was good for cross country because they could diminish with some of the older coaches that they had, and it was good for the for the Great Western Line because they could strengthen the length of all of their trains to a standard size. So, like I say, I'm not going to ramble on and on and on as I've have done previously. I'm gonna keep it simple to 2 factors. The first one was the history of Class 90s, and the some little tiny detail elements, and this interesting article I thought might be useful for people who model, and to be honest, it didn't change until Voyagers turned up. The services largely stayed the same, and the only difference was that when they started using Voyagers, instead of having 1 train an hour, they would have 2 trains an hour, one every half an hour. And so that's the reason why you would think, well, if they replaced Class 47s and 86s with Mark 2s, 7 Mark 2s, there can't be as many seats in a 4 or 5 car DEMU Voyager to fit. So they still had 1 or 2, but there weren't very many of them. That's when they started to make extensive use of the RFMs, James. Sorry, the numbers weren't really relevant. It was just you can see how the blocks were missing. And of course that kind of magazine article fits really well for me because of course I do exactly that period. I do the late 80s, early 90s period, well up to mid 90s, exactly 95. So like I say, but I'm not going to ramble on and on and on for this video. Going to keep it down to a couple of hours basically. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, you can give me a thumbs down if you like. But it's going to be nice to to do up my new Class 90s. Going to renumber them. Going to stick all the extra bits. Going to put some new nameplates on, renumber them. I use KD couplers so that I can have all the extra pipe work on the end. So I'll be cutting a square out of the skirting panels that go in them, and I'll use some filler to actually fill the gaps. So all I have is the extended draft box for the KD coupler, and then I'll just carefully. You're right, James. That's exactly why I kind of talk about things like this, because I like to see people renumbering coaches so they can say this is an actual train. It's not some maybe if possibly thing and having the same number on multiple coaches. You can have a realistic train that ran. And these books are fantastic because if you want to know for example, if you look at Mark 2Fs, Mark 2Fs can be used by InterCity cross country, they can be used by Anglia, and they can be used by West Coast Main Line cross country and Anglia. If you want to do an Anglia train, which numbers should I change them to? Well, you can look in the book and say, well, back in 1992 or 93 or whatever year you want to model it, you can see how these ones had it. So you look at pictures on the internet, you can see it's got a DBSO, it's got some first class and second class coaches and so on, and a Mark 3 buffet car or a Mark 1 buffet car, and you can figure out what these numbers could be. And at least you can say, well, alright, I may not know exactly the formation, but I certainly know that these ones were Great Eastern coaches at the time, or Great Western ones, or whatever. So, Pendolinos are. Oh, sorry, Pretendolinos. Yes. Yeah, like I say, it's nice to have fixed formation trains, and not every single coach looks the same. And it's nice to be able to say, I did that. Just to have something a little bit different. So yeah, for my 90s, I will be putting an extended length, long shanked coupler, and then I'll be, fitting all the skirting stuff so you can't see. It'll just look like the skirting with the, the gap for the draft box sticking out, and then, but that's below the buffer beam anyway. And then, I'll just have the skirting on. I'll use some filler, sand it all down nice and neat, and then, I can stick all the pipe work on. And these new Hunt couplings, I do like them. They're perfect for the trains that the InterCity trains the 90s worked with, because they were push-pull trains. And one of the problems that can happen with push-pull with a standard old-fashioned D style coupling, tension lock coupling, is, if you can imagine, you've got your hooks, and they're sort of like this, and this is the bar that they're pushing on. Well, if you get some rough track, you get a point that's it bumps. What can happen is, when it's pulling, not a problem because it's hooked onto the other vehicle, not a problem at all. But when it's pushing, what can happen is it could jump like that. And what then ends up happening is that this bogie is now lifted up slightly off the wheels. So on one end, one wheel's touching, the other wheel's just like slightly sitting up on the top. And then what happens is you go across a point, you go and derails. So having those Hunt's couplings are perfect because they push against it. There's no up and down movement on it, so it keeps it nice and straight, which I think is a really good thing. So you can imagine, when you're pulling, it pulls fine. When you're pushing, it pushes fine. And that is how, I intend to use. I'm going to get a whole bunch of these couplings, and I'll use them for my fixed formation trains, where they were good for coaches. Not so good for wagons and things, in my opinion, but certainly good for coaches, because I can have my fixed rakes, and then if I decide, because generally I go for fixed rakes, things that I've seen. I've got other rakes that I've seen, but I've gone and changed. It's like I don't want to spend a load of extra money just to do some extra coaches, which I don't really need to. So on the Great Eastern ones, for example, they had Mark II Fs, and they're the 68XX coaches, which were first class coaches that were given standard class seating and almost no tables. They only had 4 tables per coach. They were used for the commuter trains out of Paddington and London King's Cross up to Peterborough, and maybe up to Grantham as well. So and I've already got the coaches for them. I bought the Mark II Fs, the Mark II Es, which I'm going to convert into Mark II Fs, and I'm going to use my 3D printer to print all the components between the bogies so that I can have them accurate, and just drop that chassis down properly, make some modifications, stick some lights in. They'll be fantastic. Stick some couplings on, they'll be great. So I can have that I can have that commuter train, and it can either be pulled by a 90, or it can be pulled by 8901, or even a class 91, either pointy end or flat end. So that's useful. But when it comes to the Great Eastern line, they had several of these 68XX coaches in them, and so I can use the coaches out of those ones and put them with other Great Eastern, use them for West Coast Main Line ones that I can use and couple them up, and so I can make an accurate train. And just to show you one last thing that I bought recently. I bought 2 DBSOs as well. These are the blue-grey ones. I mentioned this last year. I was going to wait until they went down in price. They don't seem to have really done that. So I paid a bit more money than I would like to have done. It was £70 nearly. But so these are the ScotRail type ones, and as you can see, they've got the corridor connection with the plate over the end, and the plate pops off. So it's got the corridor connection like that. However, I'm going to be modifying these two into the InterCity version. If I just find a picture to change over this for you. So Mark II F and DBSO and InterCity. So let's wait for this to open. So this is from my 1991 combo book, just a picture there, and it says ScotRail DBSOs have been transferred to East Anglia for use on London-Liverpool Street to Norwich push-pull services, as well as the new InterCity livery. The TDM fitted DBSOs have a new cab treatment. In this view, the snowplough is retained on 9702, seen at the rear of the 0800 Norwich to Liverpool, London-Liverpool Street at Colchester. The date is 6th of October 1990. So what they did is that they took off the corridor, and it kind of looks like they've taken the plate that was over the top, filed off the edge, and then gone and welded it in to the end. So this is exactly what I plan to do myself. I'm going to use the plate, and if I've got a detailed picture that you can see the differences. Details, and there we go. Just waiting for it to open. So yeah, you can see how the change is. So, you know, they've got a coupling hook on this for some reason, but you can see how this, they've removed the original, you know, rubbery corridor section, and it almost looks like they've gone and taken this. You can see how the windows, there's different size windows on them. There's like a thinner one, this is a more thin one, but there's a wider version of it, and it almost looks like they're going to just, you know, remove this and push that back and welded it in, because you can see through. Can you see how it's still got the door behind it? We used to have a corridor door between. So another thing that I'm going to add on there as well is the radio telephone box. So you can just about see it there. There we go, that's a bit better. Some pictures from Tim Horn. So there, so I'm going to have to fit that onto it, fit that as well. So yeah, this will be resprayed into InterCity livery, but I'll be, like I say, making the extra bits to it. Now there were a couple of changes that were done to these vehicles, and I can sort of show you the range. So this is one as it was, you know, when it was modified, and you can see how it's got a little InterCity Swallow logo on, but you can see it's got the large window, which is the same as what you get on the plate. This one, that was a smaller version. One of the other little differences that happened was they put these little plates, these little flat plates on either side. I'm guessing, I don't know the actual reason, but I'm guessing that if the sun was coming from the side, it was reflecting off the windscreen, so they put this little blinder on effectively to you know, to to allow the drivers to be able to see properly. But there you go. There you can see this is the larger window size, and like I say, it looks exactly the same as what I've got on the model. So, like I say, I'm gonna make it look like that. You know, I'm not doing Scotland, so it doesn't really make sense to do it as much as I'd love to do Class 47.7 Eureka Mark 3s and Eureka Mark 2s. I don't really need to, and there are other people that are doing that as well. So, you know, but having the InterCity ones, I think would look quite cool. So the idea I've got is that I could operate the layout on a Great Eastern Day, and have 305s and 308s and well, not 308s. I can have 305s and a 302.9 and 321s, 310s, 312s, things of that nature. All these things that ran down this line eventually, here and there. 309s even. Whether these things come out in model form or not, if not, I'll make them. But yeah, you can see there's one that's had the end plated over. That's later though. One of the physical changes on the model is here. There's a tank. Having looked through the details, what was it? I see in the background that the photograph the platform information monitors. Do you plan to model those? I don't know if you're talking about the tank. Yes, I'm going to mod. I'm going to change it as it is on the, change the model to what it looks like in real. What was it? You were looking at them train monitors. Oh yeah, they're yellow train monitors. I'm guessing that was what you meant. But yeah, that's Ipswich. But like I say, that in terms of model form, there's not a lot of changes. The two things that are different is that over here with the clipped versions, like if you remember when I was talking about the 90's, they used to have the clips in the little recess below the horn cover. Well, they found that because they were pointing up, when it rained, it was getting in the clips and it was corroding the joint, and so as a result, they changed it to a little pouch, and it's literally a sort of rectangle with two side pieces, and then in the middle it's like a thin piece because it leaves space for the water to get out on either side. I did actually take some photos, I think, of that, but yeah, that's but it would. There is one thing that always has amused me about DBSO. Sorry, if you look, you can see how there's your guard door. There's a set of double doors for the for the parcels compartment section, and then you've got a driving door here. But when you look at the other side, there isn't a driving door. You got the double doors, but no driving door there. So, but yeah, like I say, this is what I want to do with this style, in the back. So it may end up being that, because when I look at the model here, and I remove the end plate, I don't, it looks like that will be really close to the front. So I think I'm going to end up having to, it looks like it, sorry, where the corridor section used to be, it kind of looks like it has, this section behind, this yellow bit behind, at the same distance as this. And then it's got the corridor connection, and then it's got the plate on the top of that. Well, I have a feeling that by the time I look at it, by the time I remove the corridor connection, that I'm going to find that this yellow piece behind is actually at the same distance there. So I'm going to have to chop it out and recess it back. Just use some plasticard spacings just to push it further back. So that's what I'm going to look to do. And there's a high probability that I will do this on the YouTube channel so people can see. I've now this looks like it's a fresh one, you know, it's like when it was first done in InterCity. Actually, it's not. You can see how it's got the orange lights for the door interlocking system. That only came on after 94, so that was added much later. So yeah, so that's my plan for this. You know, I'll point again what I mean. If you, I'm gonna have to change the zoom. So the autofocus. Okay, so if I hold that there and then turn off the autofocus, and I will manually move it, you can see how the yellow, tilt it right, so it appears that the yellow bit in the corridor connection looks like it's just the same distance as the yellow on the sides, so that needs to be recessed back, because of course the flat plate on the end needs to be at the base of the corridor connection. So yeah, one thing that I do like about this model is on the bogies. If I just move that way, you can see all the piping on it. That's from the disc brakes. So there was a thing that happened in Scotland. They took a bunch of Mark II coaches, Mark II Zs, and they gave them disc air brakes. And this one has got, and you know, the DBSOs had a disc air brake as well, instead of clasp brakes, as would be normal on a Mark II of this type. So I do like the way they've done that, and it wasn't on all of them either. It was on some, but not all. If I show you, let me just turn the autofocus back on. So if I go back to, oops, too far, right, to F, DSO. If we look at the ScotRail ones, so the case of looking at the bogies, some have just got standard B4 and other ones have got disc braked throughout this one, so you can see that's got the extra piping on it. It doesn't have the speedo pieces on, strangely. You tend to be able to see on one side, so there we go. This is one which has got the extra cabling on, and you can see the disc brake inserted there. The Batman model doesn't have that, so I'm going to get some. But you can see how it's got these speedo things on. That one's got it. That one has it. I can't remember what the numbers were now, but I actually went through. I think it was the latter ones that didn't have it, because when they extended to Aberdeen, they converted a bunch more coaches. There we go. There's one that doesn't have it. That's one of the later ones. So you can see it hasn't got the extra pipes in. There's a better example. So like I say, it's got clasp brakes there. You see. So that's a little difference you can throw in there if you wish to do something a bit different. And I'm doing 14, and I can't remember what the other one was now. 8, I think it was. So one will have it, one won't. So I'm going to need to modify this to remove the piping, or replace the bogie side frames. So yeah, just a little difference that some people. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry. You're right. I turned it on and then didn't show the transition. Okay, let me go back. I'm terribly sorry about that. Sometimes it does that. It'd be easier if it was just a hangout and I could just share the screen. Okay, so this one doesn't have them. Whereas if we go back, this one does have the pipe work. So you can see this is a clear brake wheel there. Where is it? There you go. So you can see how the surface of the wheel here is clear, and you can see the disc brake inside. You can see the disc, and the calipers are inside here. Whereas, the other one I showed earlier, this one you can see there's the brake shoe, which will push on the rim. So there you go, just a little tiny difference. Like I say, I'm doing 9712, and I can't remember what the other one was. Let's have a look. What was the other one I was doing? Okay, these are the two Great Western sets I'm doing, 9708 and 9714. So this one will have class brakes, and that one will have the disc brakes as the model comes with, although it hasn't got the disc itself. And then one of the trains has got a Mark III buffet car, and another one has got a Mark I buffet car. So, and you can see here, look, these coaches here are the ones that are on the if I scroll up, there's my East Coast Mainline commuter, so 4 and 2, 20, 24, 15, 9 and 8, and they're the ones that were in those trains. So all I need to do is take these, and maybe I'll buy some more. It'd be nice to be able to just buy two whole trains of them. But if I don't manage to do that, I can just take some, there's some Mark II Fs and some E's, so I can take those and just make these work. So I can run the trains, if I wish. One of the things that I was able to do recently was to get the other coaches to be able to do these. So it's that one and that one. So this is a cross-country set from more like 1990 kind of time. And what I like about it is it's got Mark II D, E and F. So these ones are the Hornby ones that I bought. So I bought Mark II E's, and I'm converting a bunch of them to F's because these were £14 each, whereas the Batman ones are just like 60 odd. And then but these ones, I had a bit of a duh moment at one point, and that was so Airfix Mainline Dapol Hornby did the Mark II D. The only problem is that the body shell isn't very well profiled. If we if I nip you over to let's try. So see if we can. Okay, let's see if we can see it. So the FX coach wasn't too bad in its time. The only problem is that the shape of the tumble home, it starts sort of curving over here. Can you see how the light changes here? I don't know if that makes sense to you. You know, but basically it's almost like a Mark 1 coach. It's got like a long curve that starts about here and gradually bends underneath. Whereas, I mean, what's this? No, that's a Lima coach. So, okay, there's one someone's done. You can kind of see it there. It's got, like I say, it's got a really tapered off edge to it. It'd be nice if there was an end picture. Well, if we look at the real thing though, you can see how there's a distinct curve that starts lower down and it goes right in. So because I'll be having E's and F's rather, and I'm using the Hornby model as a as a fixed type, I didn't want to have Mark II Ds that had a different shape to them here, the tumble home, because then it would look odd. You know, I'd end up with odd looking vehicles in the middle of a rake. So I decided that what I would do is I would take Mark II E's and backdate them into Mark II F's. But the nice thing is, it's easy to do, because if we go, if we look at Mark II, so let's look at a Mark. I'll open Mark II D there, and I'll go to standards, and I'll go with blue grey because it's easier to tell. I think I've got enough pictures of blue grey. So okay, so that's that one. And then with the other one here, I will go back to coaches, Mark II, Mark IIe, standards, blue grey. Okay, so I think this is the right side. Okay, that's not the right side. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so if I put I need to move this down. Just need to make it a bit lower. Useful thing about multiple screens. So if we look at the bottom boxes and things, I'll put this one down here, just make it a bit longer. Oops. Okay, now I can zoom in. So you can see that they're basically the same. Look, you've got small and a large box, small and large box, and they've got the same parts there. Here's the battery boxes, so we got that. Got this little block here, that's the same as there. This is the same there. Slightly different version of that there actually. And then you can't quite see it, but there's the motor part there. Let's see. Okay, Okay, so this is the other side, and yeah, that's it there. It's a little bit in shadow, but you should still be able to see. So for this, we've got the air brake distributor section, and that's the same there. Battery box with 2 pieces on, that's the same. This big box here with this little thing that's red there, that's that as well. You've got a bar there, that's that. That piece there is that. That bit there is that, and then this piece here is there. So all the components on a Mark II-E are on the Mark II-D as well. But what's the difference between a Mark II-D and a Mark II-E? Well, it comes down to the windows. So this one at the bottom is a Mark II-E, and if you look, you've got a toilet window here, and at the other end it's a flat plate because the toilet's on the other side of the coach there. And you know, you've got your single roof hatch as well. Whereas this one here is the Mark II-D, and you can see how it's a flat plate there and a flat plate there. And when we look at the opposite side, you can see how it's got a toilet on both sides. So what my plan is to get some short plan window frame etches, and I'm going to remove the window on the other side and fill it up, you know, fill it, sand it, and then on this side I'm going to drill out a new window and then put new window frames on for the whole train, for the whole coach. So that was it. Now I did have this really clever idea, but it's not practical. And it came to first class coaches. So both first class E's and F's and D's, E's and F's, they've all got the toilets on the same side. So if we look, you know, just look at the city ones, for example, you can see the windows stick out a bit more that way. So you can see how it's flat and then flat, and then on the opposite side you can see how it's window, window. So it's like, okay, well, what's the difference between them? Well, if you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 windows, and this one's only got 7 because the gap between the flat bits in between is wider. So what my great idea was to buy a first class coach and a standard class coach, 20 quid each-ish, and then chop this section out there and across there and file it all down, and then on this coach chop that section out here and to there, basically get rid of all this bit over here, and that will then give me a, you know, 8 windows in a 7 window space. That'll do, yeah, that'll do, because that way you've got the toilets on the same side. And then I thought to myself, wait a second, why do this when I can just get just a standard class coach and fill and drill? That's much easier. So, you know, so that was my duh moment. Yeah, that's right. The most of the Mark II Fs have a different air conditioning system. These are the Stones ones, whereas on Mark II Fs, when we go to Fs, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, have the temperature limited version, which is quite different. So let's just go to some standards. Go InterCity, because there's a lot of them. So let's wait for it to open. So this has got a large piece there. It's instead of being 2 small fan blowers, it's got one large one, and in fact if I drop this down there and find one that's the right side, wrong side, there we go, that'll do. You can see how that part's the same, that part is pretty much the same, that part is the same, but this section here is different, and that's different as well. So on this side it's everything from there that's different, and again 3D print them. And then for the other side, put that there, and there's the other side. Not the same angles, but I'm sure you can tell. So this bit, that piece is about the same, but this is different, completely different. That bit is completely missing there. There's that piece there that's the same, but this box is different. And then you've got your, the motor there. So, like I say, the idea that I have is, of course, I couldn't afford, because when you look at my model list and you notice how, I've got a bunch of Fs and a bunch of Es and some more Fs with a couple of, and an E, and then I've got the East Coast Mainline commuter train, which has, all Fs, and then I've got a West Coast Mainline one, which is, with the exception of Mark III buffet car and a DVT, is all Mark II Fs. So it would have cost an absolute fortune if, if I was to go and buy all the Bachmann ones, because the Fs, because they're Fs. And I couldn't afford to do that, not at $46.50 a coach. So what I decided was, when I saw the price of the Hornby Mark II E, and it was like 14 quid, sorry, £17 each, I went and bought a stack of them. I'd spent 4 months buying them, bought loads of TSOs and then more TSOs and then some brakes and firsts, and then I went and bought more other coaches, and then I just bought a stack. The last one was I bought a stack of Fs, Mark II standard class Fs, sorry, first class Fs, sorry, Es, and that was for the standards, InterCity, and then I've got the 6.8 XX ones I was talking about before, and these ones are so these, this is how I'm doing them. So these are first class coaches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 windows, and toilets on one side, it's the opposite side. There you go, here's the other side. And it's like, okay, well, I can do this commuter train, and that'll be just great. So, and you can see there's only 4 tables, there's 2, 3, and then there's another one behind. So there's not very many, not many tables. And like I say, Eastern region got a bunch of them, so I can do both Eastern and Great Eastern, or I can use them as the East Coast Mainline commuter train, which only ran for a couple of years, because what happened was, Class 91s and Mark IV sets came along, and when they took over, they were able to push them over. Yeah, you're right. It is a large model list, and you can see that the blue ones are ones that I've got. Green ones are ones that are fully finished. But red ones are ones that I'm getting eventually. And then like I say, then I've got some pink ones as well here and there, and those are ones that are coming out immediately, that I want. Like, for example, Hornby are bringing out buffer fitted HST power cars, so I'm going to get a set of those this year, and that will give me what's this? These ones are in a state of flux. I'm still trying to decide, maybe, but yeah, eventually I want to have 1, 2, 3, 4 trains, InterCity 125 trains, but maybe I'll have more. I don't know. But yeah, like I say, I've got quite a lot of locos, and I've actually ditched a bunch because these blue ones here, these are old Lima ones. In fact, one of those can go now because I resprayed it, so that can. And I gave it away as a giveaway. Put DCC in it. You can see these are ones where, these are all old Hornby ones. With Hellgen announcing new 4s, that'll allow me to do these ones in the pink. And then the 90's, I have about 5, I think it is. So those have now been replaced by the Beckman ones. And these ones here, I've got 2 InterCity 125s at the moment. Sorry, 225, so Class 91s, and the Mark 4s to go with them. When Hornby bring out theirs, those will be becoming towards the end of the year. Hopefully, that if they bring them out in time, in the end of the year, as they say, then that's going to be my Christmas present. I'll get those 4. And then coaches, I've just got a lot, just tons and tons. I do have some ScotRail ones marked. Maybe I'll get them, maybe I won't, but it's not a huge priority for me. They're a sort of would-like rather than a must-have. And, like I say, so I've got 2 standard 7-coach cross-country sets and 1 set that is a sort of mixed bag. And the nice thing is that I can take out that one and that one, and I can swap in a Mark IIA BFK, and I can stick them, or and stick on a Mark 1 buffet car and make that work as well. So I have options that I can do. I've got several HST sets, although I need 1 more to have the 4 that I need, because the plan is to have 4. So there's the 2 West Coast mainline ones. Those ones do the Class 90 and DVT ones. I've got to convert them though, because they're the Hornby one. And these ones, that's 1 train effectively, because if you look, the coach numbers, that one and that one are the same. 756 and 756 is the same, and these 3 are the same. Effectively what it is, this one is a Pullman set which has a TRFB and a TRFK, and then this is it when it was a standard coach. And all I've done is I've just added 2 extra Mark 200 standard class coaches, so I can just swap out the vehicles as I wish to make it a Pullman set, or sort of up to 1991, or a standard set when it was replaced by 91s and Mark 4s. So this is a second East Coast mainline set, and I've just changed that spell. This is one of the buffet cars, sorry, the TGSs that had buffers on it, so that will allow me to run with a Class 91 and Mark 4s. Class 91 pulling and pushing a Rake Mark 3s, as they did for a little while. And then I've got a cross-country set, and I would like to get another one soon. And then, I'd like to do a blue-grey set, maybe. I'm toying around doing Great Western sets, but I don't know. I'm still in flux on that stuff. But I got a sleeper train, and this just gives me options of how to model it. The grey motor rails are in the parcel stuff at the bottom, and there's a couple of Mark II. Yeah, that's something I forgot about. Those are stagecoach liveried ones, and if I do a Great Western thing, then there's my options there. So yeah, that's that. You're right, I should go to bed as well, because the thing about it is, as a part of my agoraphobia problem that I've got, when I go out I get really, really tired, and I had to go out today because I had to go to the dietitians and get weighed and discover that I haven't actually lost any weight. But whenever I go out I get tired, and throughout this discussion I was halfway through the 90s stuff and I can feel my eyes getting heavy. But I like talking about trains, you see, so I mean I could close my eyes and talk about them in my with my eyes shut. So my brain is still working fine, but my eyes are doing that thing where your eyes wanting to drift off. So I think it's time for me to go. I did say about half an hour ago that I was going to just finish with the 90s and that little article. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to actually finally go. I've been talking for about almost 3 hours now, so I think, yeah, good idea. Rightio, so thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad you. I hope you enjoyed the little monologue that I gave here, and so to speak. But a bit of history about the 90s, detail stuff, and that little article showing the changes as stuff was cascaded from one to another. And of course, that kind of thing mirrors to what happens in the real railway today. If we live, I live in Manchester. We've got these new 331 EMUs and class 195 DMUs, and those are cascading everything down. So, the new 195s are replacing 158s. The 158s are replacing 156 jobs. The 156s are replacing 150 jobs, and the 150s are replacing all the Pacers. That's basically the way it works, that they shuffle things around and push the last bits off. So, yeah. So, like I say, I hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, like I say, thumb it up. If you didn't like it, you can thumb it down if I talk too much. Okay, I understand. But I hope you got something out of it. So, thank you for watching, and enjoy your weekend. And I'm now going to end the stream. Okay, so bye-bye for now. See you another time.